But that's a great way to think about it. Open, banter, win, escalate. And then once you've already opened, banter some more, win, escalate. Banter some more, win, escalate. Whenever you get a win in the banter, you can look to make progress in the set. Almost every single time she opens her mouth and says something, there's a tease there. Definitely every time she answers a question, there's a tease there, if you wanted it, right? The goal is to be aware of all these teases and have them available to you. You should not be teasing every time she opens her mouth, because that would be too much. But if you can tease every time she opens her mouth, and you're teasing 0 out of 50, that's too few, okay? What you should be doing actually is being aware of all the teases and then cherry picking the best ones. So you pick the best like 3 to 5 teases, over a course of a few minutes. Right? There's all kinds of ways that you can have a tease or have a negative spike or whatever. And remember, here's a big thing for you guys, because you guys are all generally too nice. You can always say, just kidding, afterwards, right? If you say something that's over the top, I'm just fucking with you. Does that make sense? So if you've been overly harsh, just kidding, statement of empathy. It's a good way to backtrack from something like that, right? Just changing the subject, it does get you off of it, but it leaves it there. It doesn't correct it. Teases, to a large extent, are a means to an end, right? You tease in order to have the girl enjoying the interaction long enough to see value with you, get to know you, see how cool you are, etc. Right? If the girl was stuck with you long enough and had to see all your high value traits, you wouldn't technically need to tease her. The other thing a tease can do, the other thing that teasing is great for, is it's a pattern interrupt in a way. And so for that reason, it's good for frame control, right? It's like when a good comedian tells a good joke, it makes you laugh, but oftentimes it makes you think. It makes you see something in a different way, right? So teasing is an emotional spike, but it's also frame control. And you can have teases that are funny, but put you in a low value frame, in which case they got the reaction, but they're counterproductive. Yep. Or we can have teases that are just teases for the sake of teasing, in which case they achieve that emotional spike, but they didn't achieve the frame control aspect. Yep. But take, for example, passing a shit test, right? That's a tease, if done well, that is an emotional spike, but it's also a frame control. It's a value adjuster. It's a statement of who is valuable. It's a statement of how you see the world, all those kind of things, right? For sure. And you want your teases to be that way. You also want your conversation to be that way. It's open, establish banter. And then when you establish banter, there's a back and forth nature to banter, right? And then somebody's gonna win, right? She shit tests you, you pass it, she acknowledges it, you won. You banter, and then she breaks character and like stops the banter and asks you a logical question about yourself, you won, because she backed away from the confrontation, okay? So, but once you get a win in the banter, then you can escalate. So in this case, you just got a win in the banter. She justified herself to you, she qualified herself to you. So now you can escalate, be like, it's okay, I accept you, what's your name? And that escalation of exchanging names and saying, let's be friends, is the escalation. So you opened, you established banter, you won, now you can escalate. And actually, you could use sitting down as the escalation here too. I probably would go with something less like names first and then sit. Okay. But format-wise, getting the win and then sitting down makes sense. Like structurally, it makes sense. Okay? But that's a great way to think about it. Open, banter, win, escalate. And then once you've already opened, banter some more, win, escalate. Banter some more, win, escalate. Whenever you get a win in the banter, you can look to make progress in the set. You've had an appropriate amount of banter in this set so far. You've had a decent amount of banter. And now she's opening up, she's telling you something personal. Right? This is a good moment to actually find out something cool and personal about her and let her talk, and then you can get back to the banter in a second. Yeah. Right? Because you're in this like kind of like you just want to keep pushing the banter button, but this is a good moment to get to know her. You want to have, you call it pressure on, pressure off if you like, or you could call it baseline plot line if you like, whatever you want to do, or you could call it like gaminess and normalness, but you want that mix of the two. You want some normal, some gamey, some normal, some gamey. And here, this was really good normal. She's like, no, I don't do this, no, I don't do this. She's like disappointed that she doesn't sing, disappointed doesn't play an instrument. She tries to say this artistic thing to you. Listening to her, appreciating it, that would be an appropriate thing to do here. Yeah. And also, like if you look at the ratios in the set, the ratio of banter to normal conversation has been all banter. So normal conversation is needed. And also normal conversation about something she's into, where she's justifying herself and she's carrying the conversation, is like perfect. Exactly. And that's another good format. When a girl qualifies herself to you, there's a few things you can do off it. You can escalate, right? You can also acknowledge it and give her positive feedback, or you can disqualify her harder and try and get her to qualify more. Right? Those are different things you can do when she qualifies. when you do stuff consistently that's miscalibrated, you notice the set was going well, and then suddenly goes worse. That should be a lesson for you. It's like the way that animals are trained, right? When they do one thing, they get punished. They do another thing, they get rewarded. You learn from the punishment reward. And that's actually why, to a great extent, calibration actually comes from practice, right? The more you practice, the more you get calibrated. But it has to be practiced with awareness, right? If you're just practicing without trying to evaluate how it's going, that's not so good. And then you kind of the problem with just recognizing a miscalibration is that's great to recognize, but then what, right? The question is what to replace it with. What I would actually recommend to you is try to act a little more like you do when you're with people who are already your friends, and a little more with girls you already know like you, right? When you are absolutely certain and absolutely secure. Because a lot of the behaviors that, like uncalibrated behaviors or over gamey stuff that I see with the girls, when you're hanging out with us, I don't see any of that. Like, you're super chill and super normal and relaxed and cool with us, right? So I know that that's a put on persona as opposed to your natural vibe, right? So number one, the best way to tell calibration is it working, right? If it's not working, it's uncalibrated. If it's working, it's probably likely calibrated. But specifically, if you in general feel like you're miscalibrated but you don't know where, look at behaviors that are different than how you act around the people you're most comfortable with, or different than how you would act around girls you're not trying to game, right? So more likely it's the overt moves that are the cause of miscalibration as opposed to the more sedate parts of game, right? Because if you have a lack of spikes but you're well calibrated, you'll end up with a set that like a fire that gradually burns out to nothing, right? If you have like uncalibrated big moves, you'll end up with a big explosion that ends up suffocating the fire and putting it out, right? So you're going to have dramatic shifts. That's where you notice the miscalibrations. You're going to have like slow petering out. That's how you notice the lack of spikes, right? And understand you need both. You need periods of spike, periods of normal, periods of spike, periods of normal. If it's all spike all the time, it's going to be very hard to game. It's not impossible, but it's very hard to game that way. And it's very like high risk, right? If you don't have spikes, there'll be some girls that just inherently like you from moment one, but you're not doing enough to make it happen predictably.